Welcome back to Pokemon Episode Summaries. Today, I'll be doing Episode 79, 4th Round Rumble. The episode begins with Ash and the gang in the stands this time, as they were watching Gary's 4th round battle. That's right, Gary had made it to the 4th round as well, to no one's surprise. Along with Ash and the gang, Gary's cheerleaders were obviously watching from the stands too, cheering him on as Gary proceeded to send out his last Pokemon, being his Nidoking, and his opponent sent out his last Pokemon as well, being a Golem. Gary, as confident as ever, proceeded to order his Nidoking to go in for a horn attack, but unfortunately for it, Golem then countered with a seismic toss, and this seismic toss was actually enough to knock out Gary's Nidoking, giving Gary's opponent the win, and therefore knocking Gary out, placing him 32nd in the entire tournament, and meaning that he had been beaten by this random-ass green-haired opponent, whose name was Melissa. Gary was ashamed, I can tell you that right now, and his cheerleaders were very sad. Ash, on the other hand, was in shock. I mean, Gary was supposed to be invincible. He constantly bragged about how he could always win and how he was going to make it farther than Ash, and here we have it. Ash had made it farther than him now. I always found it so anticlimactic how Gary was eliminated before he even got to face Ash here. Anyways, Gary leaves in shame, and Ash manages to find him, and Gary proceeds to come up with an excuse that he lost, being that he got distracted by all of his cheerleaders cheering for him so much. Yeah, that's right. Gary being Gary, he still hadn't become humbled even after finally taking another L. All of his cheerleaders then proceed to cry, more sad about Gary's loss than Gary was, as Gary drives away, informing Ash that with him eliminated, all of Pallet Town was cheering for him now. Ash then talks with Pikachu, debating if they really had what it takes to win the Pokemon League if someone like Gary got eliminated, stating how much of a shock it was to them that Gary didn't even make it to the main matchups. Ash debates if he should just quit at this point if Gary lost, but Brock then comes up to him and comforts him, and he's like, "No, bro, don't compare yourself to Gary. You're strong, remember that." He also gloats himself up a bit, saying that as long as Ash had him and his knowledge by his side, Ash would do totally fine. And he also proceeds to remind Ash that it wasn't just his decision to make, but his Pokemon as well, and his Pokemon wanted to win the league, so basically, don't make a decision for them. Brock and Ash's conversation is then cut off by Misty, who runs up to warn him that his 4th round battle was starting any minute now, and he was going to be late. This caused Ash to panic as he ran to the stadium. Meanwhile, as for Team Rocket, they had yet another new plan to steal Pokemon from trainers at the league. This time, they were trying to lure them in by selling them a whole bunch of fake shit, and then they would proceed to steal their Pokemon. For example, Meowth was selling fake gym badges with cool designs, although they were actually just bottle caps. He didn't inform any of the customers of this, though, so essentially, the customers would go in the back and grab one of these badges, and then Team Rocket planned to steal their Pokemon. But it didn't seem like any customers were actually going to fall for this, even when James dressed up as his victory bell to try and entice them to buy something. This led them to question if they'd have better luck just operating a fully honest store instead. Meanwhile, it was finally time for Ash's 4th round battle on the grass field. Misty and Brock watched from the crowd, this time with Ash requesting them not to give him any help beforehand or during the match to prove that he could win on his own, likely wanting to do this after seeing Gary lose. Just then, Ash's 4th round opponent, Jeanette Fisher from Crimson City, walks out on a red carpet with multiple cheerleaders cheering her on, much like Gary. Even Brock tries to cheer her on as well, due to being the usual simp that he was, and him finding her beautiful, but Misty yells at him for this, telling him that he needs to cheer for Ash, obviously. Then the battle finally starts as Jeanette sends out her Beedrill and Ash sends out his Bulbasaur. The Beedrill starts off by using Tackle, but Bulbasaur is fortunately able to dodge it and then go for a Razor Leaf, but the Beedrill then counters the Razor Leaf with a Twin Needle to send the leaves flying, and then proceeds to use Poison Sting on Bulbasaur, but thankfully, Bulbasaur is able to dodge the Poison Sting as well, therefore not getting poisoned, yay! Despite Bulbasaur literally dodging all of Beedrill's attacks at this point, Misty is still extremely worried about the Beedrill, saying that she hoped that Jeanette didn't have any other Pokemon that were as strong as it. Brock replied, though, that all he hoped was that Jeanette didn't have a boyfriend. This leads Misty to thankfully get pissed off, actually standing up for Ash, and informing Brock that he would never get a girl, and she was right. Like, come on, Brock, you literally said that you would stay by Ash's side no matter what, and now, just because he declined your coaching, you're trying to turn on him? Bulbasaur then proceeds to use Leech Seed, which is able to drain the Beedrill of a lot of its energy, and then, since a lot of its energy was drained, it wasn't able to barely even move, so Bulbasaur is able to finish it off with a simple tackle, giving him the win. Misty tries her best to drown out all of Jeanette's cheerleaders as Jeanette sends out her second Pokemon, Scyther. Scyther instantly goes in for a slash attack on Ash's Bulbasaur, but Bulbasaur is once again able to dodge. Damn, he's good at dodging. Scyther is at least able to get off a quick attack though, leaving Bulbasaur to try and counter with Vine Whip, but the Scyther simply cuts the vines as they reach him, utilizing quick attack once more. Scyther then goes for a double team in an attempt to confuse the Bulbasaur, and Bulbasaur is in fact confused, as it can't seem to hit the real Scyther, only the two fake ones with its Vine Whip. This allows Scyther to get a few slash attacks off on Bulbasaur, and Bulbasaur tries his best to counter with a Razor Leaf, but it doesn't work as it gets cut just as another Vine Whip does. Eventually, though, Vine Whip does work as Ash manages to use it on all three of the double-teamed Scythers, doing so by going for each one individually. Meanwhile, while Ash's 4th round was going on, Team Rocket had decided not to go with the genuine store idea after all, instead opting to try to steal the Pokemon yet again, this time by hanging a whole bunch of Pikachu dolls on their balloon as a distraction, and trying to suck up all of the trainers' Pokemon with a vacuum while they were distracted. This doesn't work, as two Officer Jennies and their Growlithe immediately notice Team Rocket's balloon, and they're like, oh shit, it's Team Rocket. So they have their Growlithe fire flamethrowers at the balloon, shooting it, sending Team Rocket plummeting down as they then make their escape. But the two Officer Jennies don't let them escape, as they go up to their vacuum and disable it before pursuing them in chase. As Team Rocket are running away, they foolishly slip on a can. This gives them the idea to disguise themselves as refreshment sellers so that they wouldn't be caught, and it, fortunately for them, works. Damn, I guess Officer Jenny sucks. Meanwhile, Ash's 4th round battle was continuing, as Jeanette sent out her final Pokemon, Bellsprout. Ash was cocky at this point, as he believed the Bellsprout looked weak due to how thin its legs were. So he ordered Bulbasaur to do a simple tackle, but the Bellsprout manages to dodge by doing a little dance on its light legs. Bulbasaur tries again to tackle, but the Bellsprout is simply able to absorb the tackle's power as the tackle hits its legs. aka its legs were just overpowered, as it allowed them to absorb the power of the attacks, and essentially send it back on Bulbasaur. So the Bellsprout slammed down Bulbasaur with the power of the tackle, knocking it out. Ash is shocked because he obviously expected Bellsprout to be super weak, and this leads Brock to comment on how Ash should never underestimate his opponent, especially one that looks as weak as Bellsprout, as he doubted that Jeanette would have made it as far in the tournament if she did, if her ace Pokemon Bellsprout was super weak, so he must have been strong, and had a trick up its sleeve. Bellsprout certainly did have a trick up its sleeve, as would be revealed soon. But as for right now, Ash decided to send out his Pikachu as his second Pokemon, and ordered it to use a Thundershock, but Bellsprout was able to dodge, and go for a Razor Leaf, but Pikachu manages to dodge the Razor Leaf as it crashes into a rock instead. Bellsprout's second secret, besides the absorption, is now revealed, as Pikachu goes in for another Thunderbolt, which does make contact with the Bellsprout, but Jeanette explains that it had no effect due to Bellsprout's grounded roots, keeping him grounded. Those goddamn legs, man, or roots as she called them, they literally had infinite power, it seemed like. I guess Ash shouldn't have made fun of them. Knowing its electric attacks won't work, Pikachu decides to fight the old-fashioned way, by kicking and punching, and this does manage to do a little bit of damage, but Bellsprout just uses, surprise surprise, its legs to kick Pikachu in the head and knock him out. Misty and Brock questioned who Ash was going to use as his final Pokemon, when suddenly, Ash's mom and Professor Oak showed up to watch the match in person. Why were they here for this match in person, you may ask? Well, it's because, off-screen, Ash had actually asked Professor Oak to send over his Muck from his lab, so he could use him in this battle, knowing that Muck was a poison type, and that poison types were good against grass types. And therefore, Oak happily obliged, wanting Muck to get some actual screen time. Misty and Brock were surprised that Ash was actually able to come up with a good strategy like that without their help, but they were pleased, as Ash indeed proceeded to send out his Muck as his final Pokemon, with Oak and his mom now cheering him on in person. Bellsprout tries to instantly attack Muck with Slam and Razor Leaf, but both of these attacks get absorbed by Muck, just as Bellsprout had absorbed Bulbasaur's attacks, because Muck is so fat and slimy that the attacks just absorb right into its slime. Muck then overwhelms the Bellsprout with its slimy body by slamming on it, just as it did to Oak when it smothers him. And this ends up fainting the Bellsprout, meaning that Ash has won the battle. He has won his 4th round battle, officially surpassing Gary, and moving on to the main tournament. Let's go, everybody cheered, as confetti was blasted in celebration. And Muck then proceeds to go up to Ash and smother him with joy, just like he did to Oak, which Oak realizes, and it makes him smile instantly, because this made him realize that Muck had now bonded with Ash, just as it had bonded with Oak, which was certainly a good thing, as I mean, Muck was Ash's Pokemon, not Oak's. It should have a better bond with him. As for Jeanette, she comforts her Bellsprout and leaves the stadium, with her cheerleaders crying in dismay. I have to say, Jeanette was a pretty interesting character for only being a one-off rival. Afterwards, Ash and the gang and Oak and Ash's mom are celebrating with Muck in the waiting area, as Misty compliments Muck, which leads Muck to try and smother her as well, but thankfully he only goes in for a basic hug. The episode then ends with the torch still burning brightly, as it was time for the main matches. As for Team Rocket, they had finally decided to simply run a regular store at the league. At least until the next episode, anyway.